Hello and welcome to Android Developers Backstage. I'm Tor Norby from the Android Developer Tools and Libraries team.
And I'm Chet Haas, guest host from this room for now.
Hey, and I'm Ray Buse. I work on Core Developer at Google.
And I'm Adarsh Fernando. I'm a product manager on Android Developer Tools.
So Core Developer, I'll stop you there because normally we're talking to people in Android. Is this like completely separate group? You just happen to work with the Android group on Android-related technologies?
We work closely with the Android group, but we develop sort of the underlying tools and technologies that are used by developers both internally and externally to do all kinds of things. And we look at opportunities to bring those to the Android developer community whenever we can.
Okay, so this is like infrastructure build type stuff or infrastructure?
So Core Developer does a lot of things.
Yeah.
We'll be talking today about some infrastructure for AI testing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And one example of something that we've worked together and released people can try is Android device streaming, which we coordinated and collaborated with Ray's team on. So that was like all these devices that we had in our Google data centers for things like Firebase Test Lab. We wanted to make sure developers have easy access to do manual testing and debugging on the latest devices. And so we worked very closely to kind of make that happen.
But that's not what we're talking about today.
No,
Not
I just
talking about
asked
that
a
today.
completely irrelevant question. This had no point in the podcast at all. I just wanted to start things off on the wrong foot.
So what are we talking about today? What are you here to announce?
Journeys, not the band, but our agentic approach
It's
to
better,
automated
it's
testing.
plural.
Yeah, exactly. That's how you can tell the difference.
So what is it?
It's our agentic approach to automated testing. So, developers know and, probably dislike the amount of time they have to spend writing tests and either.
I don't know. I think a lot of developers really love writing tests.
It depends on the kind of developer you are, honestly. But
So the agent writes tons of roboelectric code for you?
Not quite. Ray, do you want to?
Oh, fortunately, the agent doesn't write any code,
That's
which
right.
is pretty cool. And what we've heard often, I work with a lot of teams within Google, and their struggle isn't necessarily even just writing the tests, it's maintaining them. And maintaining test code is very expensive. It takes a lot of time. And this is what we wanted to really focus on, eliminating that burden.
Wow. Okay, so that hits on, maybe we can come back to this later when we understand more about how the system works. But like the team that I was on, the Toolkit team, that was a big time sink in particular because some of the things that we really needed to test were very specific to how graphics worked, how UI worked, how animation worked, timing, placement of pixels, all that stuff. And so you would write these tests and it would work fine. And then 2 years later, there's a bug because it was fragile and something changed slightly here and there. And just the amount of time it took to chase it down and then fix that test that would then break again in the future was kind of immeasurable. So I don't know if
That's exactly right. And the idea of an agent is that it understands at a higher level what you're trying to achieve with your test. And so as your app changes, it can compensate for that. It can essentially be adaptive to changes in the app and still follow the journey that you want to achieve with your
And
test.
the other interesting bit is that you're taking advantage of the multimodal capabilities of Gemini, right?
Absolutely. It is essential. Yes.
So how does that work?
So when we, in a journeys test, we're using Gemini as the foundation model. We have to get Gemini to understand what screen it's on, what task it's being asked to accomplish, and what actions it can perform. So the multimodal aspect is really critical because we're both giving it information about what's on the screen based on what we call the UI hierarchy, but also the pixels of the screen and other signals that it can use to make the best decision at any point in the test.
And maybe we glossed over this, but there's no code. And so what is there instead?
Right. So in Android Studio, if you've seen the demos that we've done, you simply go into your app module, you right-click and say you want to create a new test, and you create a new journey test. And what it provides you is a field to just in plain natural language describe the steps of your test or the goals of your test. So rather than having to understand UI Automator code or Espresso, you just describe the test like you're writing a test spec.
So it'll say like, click on the nav bar to choose the button that says menu.
Yeah, and there is flexibility there. You can be more directed, where you say, hey, click on this button, then do this, then do that. or you can provide a higher level goal if you want the agent to have more autonomy in making decisions on how it gets to that goal.
What's an example of that?
So one of I was playing around with the stock clock app, and I started writing steps on like how to add Tokyo to the main screen. And so I was like, click on the plus button, search for Tokyo, tap on that first result that says Tokyo, Japan. But then I just tried add Tokyo to the clock screen. And so it did all of those steps by itself.
No way.
And then I even asked, check that the time for Tokyo is accurate. And what's great is in the test results, not only do we provide the screenshots, we provide the reasoning from Gemini. So you can build confidence that, hey, is Gemini actually looking and understanding the screen the right way? So it actually said, hey, the time on the main clock is 6 p.m. Tokyo is 16 hours ahead, did the math and says, yep, the time next to Tokyo is accurate. And that's
cool.
Now an assertion.
I mean, I just, I'm sweating just thinking about what that roboelectric test would look like.
Exactly. So it literally took me a PM, mind you, 30 seconds to write this test. So I don't know if this means developers are going to ask PMs to write more tests. Maybe we're inviting trouble here, but it took me no time at all.
Yeah, I remember when we started this project, one of the key reasons for funding it was that so many teams don't actually have tests. We kind of take it for granted. It's one of the requirements at Google to write tests. Maybe the code coverage isn't 100%. I know some teams that don't have 100%.
There's a 0 in the number, though.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, this is the cost benefit analysis developers is doing, right? Like manual testing is easy to do. There's no upfront cost, but there's scalability costs. And we know that the Android ecosystem is getting bigger, more complex. And so if you want scalability, you got to go to automated tests. But now you need engineering time and infrastructure. And so we're really trying to bring best of both worlds, where it's as easy to set up a test as it is to explain to someone, hey, here's how you would manually test it. But then you have an automated test that you can scale.
Yeah. So why is it called Journeys?
It's a great question.
It's the only word that wasn't already taken.
Yeah, we did the search. Really, it's about the central concept of, hey, if you can describe to Gemini the critical user journeys for your app, there's a number of things that Gemini is then able to do. The first thing we're focusing on is testing. But if you're able to describe what the clear user journeys are, that is something that Gemini can help test. And so it also helps make it clear to whether it's a PM or a QA on your team who are writing these tests to think in terms of what are the most important experiences of my app and to build tests around those.
So it makes me wonder whether, like the way that we were describing the sample test earlier was very unit testy, right? As opposed to what I think of in terms of these larger use cases, these larger user journeys. It's not just clicking on a button and seeing Tokyo. It is a larger journey that's about, getting to the destination that you have in mind or whatever, like a long series of things. Are you
this is definitely
thinking people use these for the micro or the macro?
This is definitely more into like the end-to-end UI testing because kind of as Ray mentioned, it is a lot more dynamic. Like there is flexibility and there's more resilience in it where, for example, if Tokyo, Japan wasn't the first item on the list for whatever reason, it still is able to pick the right item. Or if the clock was a different time when you ran your test, it can still figure out that, the Tokyo time is still accurate, right? So you're able to run these tests with real-world data, dynamic data, and as long as Gemini can understand what the goal of your test is and can reason about it and provide that feedback in the results, you're still testing that critical user journey of your app, probably more closely to how your users would actually interact with your app.
Okay. I mean, it seems like a bigger win, certainly capturing the larger use cases and user journeys.
And this is something we've seen from internal teams that have used the tool. And they really, focus on the tests that really give them the highest confidence that their app is going to work for users. And those are the UI tests. Those are the tests where they execute the full user journey, start to finish, login, internet, all these things are part of it. That's what gives them the confidence that they can release.
And a great example is like we work closely with the Google Maps team. And there's tests that they couldn't even write before. Like, for example, there was a test where they were trying to plot directions to a destination. And to actually, the view in Maps is quite custom. So it doesn't have all the layout hierarchy information that you would typically have to be able to write an espresso test. But they were able to describe assertions where make sure that there is, directions from point A to point B, whatever those destinations are, and that there's traffic that appears and there's an estimate. So all these things are just describing what's on the screen and being able to build tests around
And
that.
Gemini can look at the screen and go, yep, there's a connected line from A to B.
That's
Whereas
right.
writing the test for that, if it's not a straight
Exactly.
line.
Yeah.
more,
Also, if it's AI technology and there's not correct traffic information on the map, it could probably just reach out to the universe and create traffic just to pass the test.
Talk to all its AI buddies.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question about the higher level, like, it seems more useful at that level. On the other hand, you still kind of want the micro level of, like, make sure that when I click the button clicks, right? So is that something developers are still going to, or like some of the automated stuff is going to be generating those unit tests, or is that also sort of an idea that we start using agents for some of that stuff?
Yeah, I do think Journeys is additive here, particularly if you're not writing those end-to-end tests. And we know most developers are writing the smaller kind of unit tests. They're faster, they're easier to write. And so this is kind of additive, helping bridge that gap towards those more complex tests in a reasonable way.
I think that's a good point. I think the goal here is not to replace all testing.
Yeah.
Certainly different types of tests have different value that they bring. But we do look at, going forward, more apps are being written by AI, and testing at the user interface level is becoming more and more important to make sure that, your app does what you asked it to. Yeah, exactly.
So I wonder too about like different areas of testing. So one of the areas that I focused on a bunch in my work when I was there was performance testing, right? Make sure that you're hitting a certain time and integrate that into CI so that you're getting reports of regressions when they happen. I know like Chris and Rahul's team has focused a lot on that with some of the macro benchmark and micro benchmark stuff. So are there performance opportunities as well for this kind of tool?
So when we execute tests, we can record all kinds of information about what happened on the device. And there's things that I think will be coming in the future where we can bring more of what we do internally, externally as well. But yeah, I mean, performance testing, in some cases, it may not be appropriate for Journeys. There may be specific cases where that's not the right thing to use. But in many cases where you want to know how long does my app take to start on 10 different devices, how long does various network requests take, stuff, all kinds of performance things you can do with a journey.
This might be a good time to talk about cached journeys.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So feedback that we've heard very strongly from developers when we've kind of talked about Journeys publicly is first questions we get is like, okay, what does this look like when I run on my CI? And we have a discussion about, okay, well, what's important there? And we know from there's a mixed bag here. So developers look at AI to be, hey, I really like the fact that AI can be kind of autonomous, test things in different ways. We'd love to run those on CI. But then equally, developers want tests to be able to run highly deterministically and quickly and without having to reach out to AI all the time to make those take those actions. So something that we are working on is once you have written a journey and you have Gemini run through it and you like the actions it takes, at that same time, we generate programmatically those actions. Actions that can run programmatically. Like maybe perhaps it'll be UI Automator test code. We're still trying to figure that out. And then you can run those repeatedly in CI. So now the way you've authored that test is through Journeys, just using natural language prompts. And we've had AI kind of convert those to actions, and then we've converted those actions into code. And so you can run those in CI, and what we would consider is that the journeys is the source of truth. If you add a new feature or change a behavior, you update the journey, and then just as easily you can regenerate that code. One other really cool idea, and a lot of developers have kind of already talked to us about it, is the ability to then also repair tests. So if you can imagine like you have generated test code from a journey, which is UI Automator code, and then something changes in your app which causes that relatively brittle code to fail, we could fall back to the journey, rerun that. If that passes, rerun the cached set of actions. If both pass, we can say, hey, we caught that there was a small behavior change or something brittle in your test. We've regenerated that cache, and we've essentially updated the test for you and offer that to developers.
Yeah, it's not, I don't even know if brittle is the right word, right? But like the AI can be very adaptive, right? So the UI can be very different. The way it looks on, let's say, Android XR, and the way it looks on, a phone. And so the cache journeys for those would look very different because it's going to access different paths to get there.
That's right.
Right. So I think the cache journey is less of a test. It's just more going to make sure that nothing changed, right?
That's
on
right.
the same device. And that's really, and the reason I raised, hey, we should talk about cache journeys is because of the performance questions you had. You can imagine that now you're no longer waiting for the latency of talking to Gemini. You are now just running UI automator actions, and you could time that and time it over time and so on.
Yep, and you can plug that into generating traces as you go.
Yeah, and I think what the libraries team is really excited about for this is that this lets you create baseline profiles. Because today we have some defaults in Android Studio that spits out a baseline profile for just launching your app. And that's good. So you'll make sure that at least the code that's running on the startup path is warmed up. But what if your app has like a scroll feed? You really want to sort of scroll that too to make sure that there's no jank the minute the user does something with that screen. And today we just have a long comment in the template that says, oh, now you should write some espresso code here to exercise your app. I wanted to do that last year or so, and I was searching how to do this, and I kind of gave up. It wasn't worth my trouble. But if I could basically just write it in English and then have it generate one of these things, that would be really valuable. And then I have a more accurate way to represent the critical user journey in my app and have that represented in the startup profile.
So yeah, we are definitely listening to feedback. So this is a great time to plug that anyone can try journeys.
Yeah, this is one of those things we really want feedback on, right?
That's right.
Because it's kind of there's like offline and then there's the cache.
It's complex. Once we started getting into it, like, hey, this is a pretty complex project. So not just as easy as, hey, AI, run my test for me. There's how you actually get this to fit into developers' day-to-day, and a highly tuned workflow is complicated. So yeah, we definitely want feedback. It's available in Canary for Android Studio today, so you can try it out. And yeah, we definitely want feedback.
I'm also really excited about use cases that we haven't even thought of. When we made this available internally, there were teams that came up with uses that were way beyond testing that I didn't expect. So like anti-abuse and things like that in different teams.
That's basically the ability to have the AI derived through the app, right? Because the thing you have is not just grab a screenshot and explain what's going on, but it's then take an action on it and where to click on the screen. And some of those things are harder than clicking, right? Like
that's right.
Dragging and pinching and things like that.
So I was wondering about that as you were talking about how the thing worked. Like, does it have the ability to, does it know what all the screens of your app are? So you just described the journey that's going to take you, through the login page to the scrolling screen, and then you're going to tap on a particular item and make sure that, this, recording option comes up or whatever it is. Like, does it know how to generate all of those artifacts that it can then draw from?
So Gemini has training data that includes screens of apps. And when we run one of these journeys, it's making a decision on each step, on each screen, what is the next logical thing that I can do to get closer to the goal that the user specified.
Okay.
We're looking at, in the future, other ways to provide even more information to give the model more context about the specific app, maybe this domain of apps. There's lots of directions we can take this.
Does it have any memory? Of what it did?
It does.
Screens? Okay.
It does. That's correct. So it knows what has happened, and we also tell it what is coming up in the journey. So it can understand, again, what the context is. When we don't have that information, it can kind of get lost going in the wrong direction or being perhaps too eager to try to anticipate what you're trying to do, and actually that can derail the test. So these are part of the what we're learning, what we're every day when we're experimenting with it and trying to figure out how best to accomplish the journeys in the most reliable way we can.
So is it a good mental model to think of these journeys as being equivalent to writing a test spec for a manual tester?
I think so.
Because like a manual
so.
tester could also not know how to navigate your app if you have sucky UI.
That's right.
You're like,
That's right.
I don't see any, right? And so Gemini might have the same problem then, right? If it's just a bad.
Does it have the ability to look at the code in your project and say, oh, there's an ID associated with this? Like if you say click on the submit button, it knows about Android resources or whatever.
It does. So we use UI Automator or Espresso under the hood to extract the UI hierarchy information, which is the same kind of thing that a screen reader would give you. And that information is given to Gemini along with the screenshot. And that's actually really valuable. We found that just the screenshot actually was often not enough to get the right answer. But Gemini is always improving, and we're excited every time a new version comes out that we can test and see what it can do and what information would be most helpful to add to that.
And I think it's a point to make is that we actually don't share source code. And that is, to some teams, a benefit that we just send the APK. It's data that can be extracted from the device when the APK is running, plus screenshots. So we actually don't require sending any of your source code to run these tests.
Is this stuff being run like on the back end? Like, are we sending that APK information is going to Google services to produce this information? So it's not happening like in the studio process or whatever locally to your host.
No, it's running on the local device, right?
Ray, do you want to talk about?
Well, you can run on any device. It just needs ADB access. Now, the Gemini is running essentially in Google Cloud, as well as the backend service that is essentially creating the prompts and getting the responses back from Gemini and translating those into actions that can then be run. But the app and a special APK that allows the Journeys system to interact with your app is on whatever device you choose, and that could be local.
Yeah, so I think there was a comment about the APK being uploaded, but I think only to the device.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Correct.
only the data from the device that's
Correct.
getting transmitted.
Got it. Okay.
And does this work well with Compose as well? The reason I'm asking is I heard view IDs, and I was like, that's not a Compose thing, right? So I'm just...
Yeah, so I mean, the beauty of it is we're hoping all developers are using Compose, but even if you have screens that are views and some are Compose, or you might need to go to SysUI, it doesn't matter, right?
Because it's just looking at the screen.
It's just looking at the screen. It's able to go across these different frameworks without you having to write tests differently or handle.
So UI Automator, I mean, I understand that you might be taking the accessibility tree, and that makes sense because Compose is going to support that. But that wouldn't include things like view IDs, right? So I'm just trying to understand.
I mean, so different apps, we extract different information depending on what we have. And
I see. So you'll just take whatever you can get.
I mean, we've done games as well. So in those, you have essentially no information.
You're just looking at the pixels, and Gemini's pretty good.
Yeah,
understanding
that's right.
the screens. Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, I wouldn't say that games are a different beast. So I will say that it's not going to be able to play Doom on your phone.
What I want, because I cannot progress in Elden Ring. So I'm just going to pretend it's a journey and say, beat this monster so I can...
I think we're going to need a whole different agent for that.
Okay, I just need V2 of this.
V2, yeah. I think that should be one of our evals, the Elden Ring eval.
And we'll call
the final
that
boss.
The hero's journey.
Sounds good.
I think it's also important to mention that we have another partner here that couldn't be at the podcast today, but we are working very closely with Firebase. And you might have heard one of their announcements at Cloud Next, which is an AI testing agent. And so they are very core collaborators in this. So the same agent that's working in the back end for AI tests that you're running with Firebase is the Journeys agent. So it's the same back end service that we're using. And the goal is that, these Firebase provides kind of like the scalability in terms of like being able to run these tests on a large number of devices. If you don't have that device farm, we do want that interoperability there.
So I could use this feature in Studio with Firebase device streaming.
That's right.
For a specific device, but the Firebase service you're talking about lets me sort of just say, hey, take this journey, run it across whatever devices you think is necessary, and then...
That's right. So the idea is first, hey, let's really make sure that the solution works well in our respective products, and that's kind of the phase we're in right now. But we do want this feature where you can run that test on Firebase and you have consistency there because it is the same agent. It's the same, talking to the same model. So you can author and validate your journeys in Android Studio, and then scale with Firebase.
Yeah, and the specific product is called App Distribution. That's where you can find this feature in Firebase. And there's the app automated testing agent you can find there, and you can try journeys with just uploading your app APK.
Okay. But the journey that you create locally, like to Tor's question, your answer, it sounds like it's not quite there in terms of I just created a journey and tested on my device. It's plugged into my host machine. I cannot currently upload that to Firebase and say, now put this in your...
Not in so much as a click, but you can cut and paste those prompts. Okay. I know it's right. Very unsexy.
The plan is to have it be like bundled with your APK, right?
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Speaking of features, what are the features in Studio for journeys? Obviously running.
Right. So when we're thinking about the whole, like, hey, how do we write, modify, run these tests? We want to make sure it's a really great experience. So under the hood, the artifact that you're creating is an XML based file. So syntax that Android Studio is very familiar with and pretty straightforward. But we have a really nice GUI on top of that. So right now it looks a little bit like a form field. We're trying to make that even more seamless, like you're almost editing a Google Doc where you can just start typing, hit enter for the next step, cut and paste, move things around, but a very fluid way to kind of write your tests as logical steps written in natural language. And then when you go to run your test, we provide a lot of feedback to developers because, you know, when you get AI to run and make assertions, you want to understand what it's thinking or how is it approaching the problem. So a great feature that came from engineering was to include Gemini's reasoning there. So for each step in the test results, you can click through, see screenshots, and see how it reasons by, hey, here's what I'm looking at. Here's the action that is being asked from me. Here's what I think I should do, and I'm going to do that. And then another step, automatically it says, hey, I think I've completed that step because the next screen is what I'd expect. And similarly with assertions like the example I talked about where it shows its math about is Tokyo showing the right time. That's all there to help build confidence in the solution that, hey, Gemini is understanding the test the way I expect.
It's also useful when the assertion fails and you're like,
that's right.
Why?
And yeah. And if you think about like when you have manual testers and they are providing you rich feedback, not only that a test has failed, but why did it fail? What was unexpected that they think this is a bug? Gemini can provide some of that articulation as well.
I was playing with a test just the other day had an assertion failure. And it was a test for just the calculator app. And in the test, it said, type in a 1 and then hit the clear button and assert that the 1 is no longer visible. And the test was failing. It was like, oh, why? Well, there's a 1 on the keypad on the calculator. So it was still there. And the assertion just needed to be refined a bit to say it's not visible in the number entry, part, not in the keypad.
Yeah,
so.
I'd like to emphasize the A in AI is artificial.
Yeah.
So there, you're still talking to a program, but those things kind of help you understand.
Right.
Okay, what do I need to tweak now to help that test pass? But yeah, as we mentioned, we are thinking about offline as well. So being able to run in CI as well as being able to run on different form factors. Part of it is, when you're running with Gemini, even if layouts change between phone and tablet, but it's still the same app, you still have the same expected journey, it's able to adapt in those ways. But when you have cached actions, we have to think about those things. When it's more like directed programmatic actions, we need to think about, okay, how do we generate these for phones, and then how do we generate for tablets? So a lot of things we're thinking about there.
So what are the expectations now in terms of people using it? That you create this journey, you're happy with the journey, and now it just gets saved as an artifact in your project somewhere, and when you want to run it again, you open that journey and play it?
Yep, that's exactly right.
Or you can run all the tests, in your project or in the package,
okay.
right? So you don't have to go and click on each one.
Okay, so the CI thing. Obviously, that's sort of an obvious thing to come in the future. But for now, it's a bit manual. But you can at least.
It is a Gradle target, so you can just run. The Gradle
okay.
task.
Yep.
All right.
We'll have Gradle tasks, so you can run with Gemini from command line.
Yeah.
When you run, you can open the window and see the Gradle task it actually ran.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was a lot of extra work, but we want to make sure we didn't have, separate handling for the two.
And this is with the whatever level of Gemini comes with Studio.
Yeah, you have to have onboarded. And I guess, from CI, that's one of the challenges, right?
Yeah, you have to onboard. And right now, I think we're using 2.5 Flash.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. So a pretty advanced model, but Flash so that we can kind of reduce that latency. And I do want to point out, when you compare it to running tests like you typically would with Espresso UI Automator, it is slow. It is much slower because, we have to send screenshots. Gemini has to think and reason about things. But our hope is that it speeds up authoring. And then if it's able to execute your test and we generate cached actions from those, and that's what you're going to be running the majority of the time, that should be fast. Right. So at least, when you're running it in Android Studio using Gemini, it's a little slower, but at least it accelerates your ability to author.
There's about 2 seconds of latency. It's like 90 percentile, actually. So it's not too bad, but per action, yeah.
Yeah, compared to automated tests, so it's like...
Or certainly a manual test. It goes faster than I would in a lot of cases.
And 24/7.
I mean, if you map this to, a manual test run, right? I mean, at least that's my mental model for Android Studio. We have a bunch of end-to-end tests that run on the continuous integration server. They run for every CL. But that's not all of our tests, right? So we had a much larger battery of tests that we run for each stable release, just, 3 times a year. And I can imagine having tons of these journey tests. And it's not that you need to run them all the time. It's that before a new release, you're like, okay, let's start the journey tests now. And we'll come back and check in the morning and make sure that, there's nothing unexpected. And, that might be a good model for some as well.
That's right. Yeah. One area that we're also thinking about, like Journeys is an agent, but we have other agents in Android Studio. And we're also thinking about, we're getting into the space of, hey, the agent can help like write code for you, write new features, add new behaviors. Could it also write tests a la Journeys? So if it understands the functionality you're adding to your app and understands your app, could it then in natural language create journeys for you that it can then use to validate whether the code it wrote met your expectations, right? So if you say, hey, write me a calculator app, can it then generate journeys for what it thinks a calculator app ought to do, run those journeys, see the results, and say, hey, does my code actually satisfy those requirements? And if not,
Gemini's pretty good at that.
Yeah.
Right. Before I did a demo at DroidCon last year, and it was for a podcast app, and I started trying to think of stuff myself, and I thought, wait, hold on, let me just have Gemini come up with some plausible user journeys for a podcast app. But sure enough, it spit out a bunch.
Yeah,
and that was good sample data at the time. But
I remember the early days when we're still putting this pitch together. We had our Now in Android app, our quintessential sample app. I just threw a screenshot of it in there and say, hey, what are the common journeys? And it was able to predict subsequent screens just by looking. Oh, there's a bookmark tab. So you should be able to bookmark things, and that's where you see your saved articles. It's very good at those sort of things.
And it can take a bigger step back, too, and say, well, this was really hard to test, so I'm just going to change your code here to simplify your app.
Exactly.
And remove those features that I found very difficult.
Yeah. It's hard to bookmark an app that doesn't have any articles. Yeah. There you go.
So, solved.
Next problem, please.
So it's out in Canary now.
That's right.
Do you anticipate this is the set of functionality that you're going to try to land in this release? Or are you still cranking on things keep checking on the Canary release every week because we're still adding in some fundamental stuff?
Yeah, we are really focusing on the quality of the agent, right? If the reliability and accuracy isn't there, then all the stuff afterwards doesn't really matter. So that's where collaborating with Ray's team and Firebase is so critically important. We have lots of people who are very much believe in this future, really working to improve the quality of the agent, its reasoning capabilities. And so we're building out all the different evals, lots of different types of apps, a lot of different interactions. I'd like to say a month ago, we added swipe. So being able to swipe across screens or to delete items in a list. So those sort of things, building those out. So that's where we're really focused on. And I think we'll only go to stable when we feel that it meets a certain bar of confidence for at least core interactions.
Yeah. And as you know, Studio's philosophy is we're not date-driven, we're quality-driven, right? So the feature gets to ship when it meets its bar.
Okay.
And Gemini reminds us that every day.
Right. I was thinking an interesting part of the swipe feature test would be, and did my app just close down because there's something we didn't handle the gesture correctly on the left-hand side of the screen, which is so annoying.
We've seen a lot of fun things happen with Gemini. And, as we're learning and as we're tweaking things, sometimes it does an interaction where it goes out of the app and then it tries to find out, oh, hey, you wanted to add a clock or something, Tokyo or whatever, and it opens up the calendar app and maybe I'll add an event for Tokyo and maybe I'll change your calendar time to Tokyo, and it does a lot of fun things. It's interesting.
Yeah, be careful running on your personal device if this, who knows what it might do if it gets sidetracked. So.
Actually, that's a question. It makes me think. So maybe the road to, certainly the short-term road to CI is, okay, you have these actions, you sort of cached actions.
Mm-hmm.
We embed this thing in code that can be deterministic, right? But it is like slightly non-deterministic until you bake it into code, right? Which means, well, how do you know what the version is that you're about to bake? Like, oh, I'm really happy with the latest run, and so you tell it to run actions, and it basically goes through the machinery again, generates code that might be slightly different.
Well, that's the beauty of it. So it's every time you run a journey, we create these cached actions.
Oh, okay. So you can grab the actions from the previous run that.
And then if you're happy with its run, those actions are already there, and it's up to you whether you want to commit them to your source code or overwrite.
That's very clever.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm impressed.
We got some cool people working here.
What did we not ask that Gemini would have?
We should start doing that. We'll just sit here and prompt it for questions.
I'd like to. I mean, Ray, do you want to kind of talk about how like you're thinking about, at least internally, journeys as a platform? Just because I believe a lot of people would love to hear how seriously we're taking the technology and how much we believe in it for our own apps and our own needs.
Oh yeah, I think if anything, I think there's almost too much enthusiasm that we can't keep up. So many teams are excited to use this, and like I said, for use cases that we didn't even think of, and they're asking us to add, so many things to it. And, for us, it's about just trying to make sure that, like Adarsh alluded to, that we are focusing on quality first, and then we're building on top of that. But, the future of the sort of agent full cycle development process is what a lot of people are working on. The idea of creating an app, testing it, fixing issues, all of these things coming together. And we think journeys is like a really key part of that. You have to be able to perform actions on devices in a reliable way and get back the information you need to make smart decisions about what to do with those results.
Yeah. And so teams that we've talked about are, have very specific needs, and maybe they're not looking for an agent where we're thinking very broad set of apps and very broad capabilities, because developers are testing all sorts of things, as they should. And so they have very specific needs. So what Ray's team is really building a journeys platform where we have the ability for internal teams to kind of plug in their own agent, because maybe YouTube has very specific needs of making sure they're looking for policy infringements. And so they have a purpose-built agent that they can kind of drop into this platform, utilize all the other parts of what Journeys is to really focus on tests of that nature. So I think even internally, we're really seeing this as a foundational technology for enabling fast ability to write these kind of purpose-built agents and tests.
Mm-hmm.
If I never have to write another end-to-end test, I'd be very happy.
I mean, I will say, again, like we are not, we're still really thinking about what developers are using today and how we can speed that up. So we are still thinking about, hey, how can agents help you write unit tests and other forms of tests? But,
I mean, it's actually so cool. Really good on the Android Studio team, because Android has really good support for end-to-end tests.
Mm-hmm.
You have Espresso. We don't have that for the IntelliJ code base, right? Which is a lot of Swing and some Compose now, and so we have our own framework, but it's not that well maintained, right? And so we actually want to use Journeys for ourselves too, to test all those various corner cases. There's lots of functionality we don't work on actively. Let's say the GitHub support, right? That mostly comes inherited from JetBrains, but for us to cover it with a test, it's pretty useful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also kind of want it way back in the day when we frankly wrote very few tests at all.
Yeah.
Unit, or certainly not Journeys.
Yeah.
It stood. We were too busy just writing the code to make the thing work. So tests were very much a afterthought.
Now anyone can write a test.
Yeah, exactly.
Even PMs.
Right. I think
get all up in there.
like approaches and tools like this make it possible for everybody to just go, yep, and I got the thing, instead of having to make a decision or going, I don't want to do that, or I don't have time. It's like, no, this is just part of the process, and it.
I mean, we've all had that experience, right? Of you fix a bug, and that took you 15 minutes, and then you spend 2 days trying to make it testable, right?
Absolutely.
And then, again, I think one thing that we're excited about as well is just the exploratory nature of AI, where, maybe you just kind of unleash it on your app and see what ways could it break that you haven't even thought of to write tests.
Is that something you would do in a journey, or are you not talking like, hey, other agents built on top of this? I could totally imagine having some sort of a validation scenario for like adaptive.
Sure.
Check to see whether this app works well across different form factors.
And that's the beauty of the Journeys platform, right? Like we could have these purpose-built kind of agents. So you're right. It might not be the Journeys agent we have kind of today, which is really built around, tests, but we have an agent that can utilize Journeys' ability to kind of interact and understand a screen, but is trying to validate large screens or do more exploratory testing.
In the era of exploratory testing, the thing is that often you do need to provide certain information like hints, like even if it's just login or you want to guide the exploration in certain ways. So there's a lot of overlap between Journeys and exploratory testing. And the same platform that we're working on is capable of doing both. And we're trying to figure out how to form this in a way that is most useful for actual developers. And that's where we really want to get feedback on that. So ideas from people of how they want to approach exploratory testing would be really valuable to us.
Something you said reminded me of a question I had earlier, but then the conversation moved on. When I was playing with this, sometimes my app is starting from zero state. And so I have to go and like log in, right? So I'll write my script to do all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Next time I run, I've already logged in. How are you thinking about this, of sort of like defining like, I mean, I would think of this almost like a conditional, right? Or an include or something, right? But like, oh, here's my app setup. But then I don't want to repeat that in every part of my podcast app journey. Like they should just like get me to log in.
Yep.
Here's my new journey.
Yep. So that, I mean, one cool thing is that the agent is actually capable of doing something like where if you say, if necessary, log in with this information. And the reasoning can be, I'm already logged in, I'm already on the home screen, so I don't need to do that and I can skip it. So the idea is that you don't have to think about that so much as a developer. The first time you do it, you do need to provide that, and then after that. Now, we're also talking about other ways we might even be able to make that kind of thing scale better, ways to compose journeys. Maybe Adarsh has some thoughts on that, but
I wouldn't want every journey to have the exact same.
Yeah. And that is feedback we've gotten from developers who've tried Journeys out, run into the same problem. It's like, hey, it'll be great if I could just define this core journey once and then be able to reference it. And so that is things that we need to think about. But there's other mechanisms.
Blocks.
Sorry?
Building blocks. Where
Exactly.
You say, okay, use this test and link it onto this other one afterward.
And if the agent understands what these other building blocks are, could it call up those building blocks?
I think building block is the wrong metaphor for a user journey. I think we're mixing things here.
Let's get into it.
Well, speaking of which, I think obviously the most important thing to solve is one of marketing. Can I pitch a slogan for you?
Oh, please.
Journeys, don't stop believing.
I knew you were going to say that. Believe it or not, that's how I end all of my Journeys product reviews. Thank you. And I put the album cover up there.
In tests. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
All right.
I think that's the name of our exploratory agent, probably. Don't stop believing. You'll get there one day.
But also trust and verify, right? Like
Trust
one of
and
those, you don't want to
I don't
only
remember
believe.
that tune.
Yeah.
No.
How does it go?
Yeah. And so call to action is try it, and you want feedback?
Absolutely. We want feedback. We think this is additive. We want this to be a positive, additive experience for your team. And so we want to know how this fits or doesn't fit into your workflow and what you need from us to get it there. So, try it today. It's in the Canary channel. There's documentation there. So
Legs, not building blocks. Legs. It's legs of a journey.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like it.
Okay.
All right, we've solved that one.
Solve that one. Yeah. Podcast-driven development.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right. Well,
Right.
thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. It's been great. Yeah.